Today we're talking about 10 plants that I'm currently obsessed with. Hey everybody, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm very aesthetically driven when it comes to my plant hobby. I want my plants to be statement pieces. I want them to be artworks within my apartment. I want them to fill my space. So really easy concept for today. I really just want to show you some of the plants that I'm currently obsessed with based on their current growth, based on the way they currently look. Alright, so let's get started, and maybe we just start over here. Alrighty, here we are. First plant, Philodendron Splendid. It is currently my favorite of my velvets. It's because that newest leaf is honestly just the largest one it's given me so far. It keeps growing after its chop and extend like nothing happened. Let me show you there. There's another leaf coming out over here. Honestly, this plant is so fuss-free. I never had any pest issues with that. It's never really given me any trouble. So this is not just a current favorite of mine. This is definitely an all-time favorite as well. And of course, I'm obsessed with the red backs of the leaves because Philodendron Splendid is a hybrid between Philodendron melanochrysum and Philodendron verrucosum. So it gets the best of both worlds. Yeah, I thought I can't not have a velvet philodendron in my top 10 list, and this one's taken the cake at the moment. By the way, I get asked a lot how I manage to just pick up the plants by the pole without the pot falling off, or how I secure the pot to the pole. So I do nothing. I just put the pole in the pot, I top it up with aeroid mix, and then eventually the roots will make sure that it all holds together. That's it. I don't cable tie the pole to the pot. I don't do anything fancy. It's honestly just roots and a lot of willpower. Next up, and I'm pretty sure you can't actually see all the way, so let me tilt this plant so you can see the top. Look at how nice the top has grown and how many fenestrations it's got. This is my Monstera silta picana El Salvador. It was one of my first plants. So this plant has been with me for over 3 years, and it's gone through 2 or 3 chop and extends already. So if you're not familiar with chop and extend, basically all of my moss poles are 180 centimeters tall, and they're made out of 2 90-centimeter moss poles. So once the plant reaches the top, which it currently has, I'll just chop it in half, I take the top, I pot the top back up, I re-extend it, and then the plant just keeps growing. So I always use the top part of the plant, not the bottom part, which makes sense. Look at it. The top is the part that looks nice. It has the bigger leaves, it has the fenestrated leaves. The bottom part, those leaves are a little older. They start going a little bit paler in color. They're also smaller, not as many fenestrations. That's not the part I want to keep. I want to keep the top. And that chop and extend is facilitated through the root system within the moss pole. So I hope the camera is going to pick this up. This plant has rooted like crazy from the moss pole all the way into the pot. So yeah, this is due for a chop and extend really, really soon. Alrighty, over here, this plant I'm waving around is my blood banana. It's Musa akinata Sabrina, I believe. And I got this for Christmas last year from AJ. And I pop in photos of all the plants if I can find them, and like a bit of a timestamp so you can see how they evolved. I wanted this plant so badly, and then when AJ gave it to me for Christmas, I was so happy. It took me a little while to figure out how much light it wants. It's a banana plant, so it's not an aeroid, and I don't have many non-aeroids. I put this in a much more water retentive mix. It's pretty much just cocoa peat and perlite, half-half, a little bit of bark just to give it a little bit of volume as well and like air it out a little bit more, but much more water retentive than any of my aeroids or in my aeroid mix. By the way, there is a playlist called Moss Poles. All of my informative stuff, all of my tutorials, all of my aeroid mix, how to make moss poles, how to extend them and so on. Everything is in that playlist, but I also have all of my tutorials linked in the description. So if you want to learn more about any of these concepts, just check out those videos. Today, I just really want to show you some of the plants. So yeah, and it seems to be really enjoying this finer mix. And I mean, you can see there are some roots within the pot. It's only had 1 repot since I had it. It's in a 20 centimeter pot, and yeah, it's growing well. The one thing I noticed, it really doesn't like too much light. When it gets too much light, these leaves start really curling in because they're really thin as well. And they don't really, I mean, they do recover a little bit, but if that happens all the time, they actually start going yellow really, really quickly. Overall, this plant doesn't hold on to that many leaves at a time. I think this is the most it's ever held on to. But usually it just holds on to like 3 to 4 leaves for me. So the old leaves just go yellow and then I just get rid of them. Definitely a bit of a spider mite magnet. So I spray this with water every week. And then if I actually see some spider mites, I also use some Vitality Plus. But just as a preventative, I spray this plant every week. It also, because the leaves kind of like more horizontal, it catches a lot of cat hair. It's very close to my bed as well. So another reason to give this a nice spray to actually make the leaves look nice. Alrighty, let's have a look at this plant over here. This is Philodendron soliroy. And the reason I like this plant at the moment is because of the back of the leaves. I mean, you can see that new leaf unfurling over here, and I just think the back of the leaves and the perfect heart shape, the red veining, I don't know, I find it very sexy. Now, with this plant, it's very different to most of my other philodendron on moss poles. I'll show you a photo of when I first put that plant on a moss pole, and it's almost 2 years ago, or like more like 1.5-ish years ago. But this plant is only here, so it's like here. So it has maybe it's maybe up 2/3 of its moss pole, still a third to go, and it never had a chop and extend. It still has, I think this was the first leaf that it grew for me over here. I hope you can see that. So it hasn't really lost any of its leaves, but also it's growing really, really slowly and with very short internodal spacing. So it's not climbing a lot. Whereas if I compare that to my Splendid, for example, which I got only 5 months before I got this one, so not too much of a difference. This Splendid has had like 3 chop and extends already. So overall, it would have climbed 5 moss poles already. Whereas this one's climbed like 2/3 of 1 moss pole, just because it has much shorter internodal spacing. So if you don't want to extend your moss poles because you don't want to have really large moss poles, or if you don't want to chop and extend, or if you're afraid of chopping and extending because you haven't really tried it before, Philodendron soliroy would be a great one to get because you don't really have to worry about the maintenance. I repotted it once. At the beginning it was in a 14 centimeter pot, and then as I noticed that, okay, this is going to spend a lot of time on that 1 moss pole, I potted it into a 20 centimeter pot. Normally I pot it from a 14 to a 20 centimeter pot when I do the extension, just for stability purposes. But I figured this one is going to take a while until it actually needs an extension. The only thing I don't necessarily like about this plant is that as it matures, it starts losing a bit of its silver. So we'll see. I might want to chop it back one day so that it can kind of revert back to smaller leaves again to show me a little bit more silver. But we'll see. I'll take it as it comes. All right, let's talk about the one right next to me. Let me maybe bring it down. That soliroy spreads like crazy. If you want to fill a lot of horizontal space, get a soliroy. It spreads, has really long petioles. Yeah, that's probably another thing I don't necessarily like over it, but the leaves make up for it. Anyway, let's move on to this plant. This plant has gotten a lot of attention on YouTube recently because whenever I film a video and I film it over here in my living area, this plant actually lives right next to me. So it's always in frame and people are obsessed with the variegation. This is a Mangela apothos. It's a very common plant, at least over here in Australia. You can easily get your hands on it. And it has beautiful variegation. Normally, I see people growing it in pots and trailing it down. But you guys know me, I love climbing things and I love watching plants mature. Now, this plant is a slow grower, at least for me. I don't know exactly when I put this on the moss pole, but the first photo I can find of it being on a moss pole was in March 2022, so last year. Or like 10 months ago, and it was kind of up to here at this stage. So within 10 months, it climbed, oh, this could be about 90 centimeters. So it climbed approximately 1 moss pole, which is okay. It's not super slow, but compared to other pothos or compared to some of my other philodendron, this is actually quite slow. Not complaining, because if it's a slow grower, it also means that it's less maintenance. I don't need to extend it, chop and extend, and so on. Obviously, I still need to water it, but never mind. Now, let me rip off this leaf. It's going a little bit yellow. This was one of the original leaves that it had when I put it on the moss pole. And then as it started climbing, obviously, it has started increasing in leaf size quite decently. I really, really love this plant as it matures. I was never the biggest fan when I had it like just sitting in a pot and it wasn't climbing yet, but as it climbs, I'm falling more and more in love with it. And the variegation on it is crazy. I don't even know how it survives with so much white and so little green, but not complaining, I'm loving it. By the way, if your oldest leaves at the bottom start going a little bit yellow, or like, you need to pluck them off, that is totally normal. This leaf could be, a year and a half old by now. Like, leaves also just have a limited time span. They don't live forever. As long as it's always the oldest leaf at the bottom, I would never be concerned. If it's starting to go yellow at the top, then I would definitely be concerned, because something must be wrong for that to happen. All right, let's move on from all of the larger plants and let's have a look at some of the smaller ones, or the most recent additions. This is my Philodendron Bono. And you might have seen the reel of me putting it on a moss pole just a month ago. Since it's been on the moss pole, it's given me its very first leaf, this beautiful, super, super variegated leaf over here. And I'm just obsessed. It literally just unfurled, so it's still going to increase in size a little bit. And I believe that over time, it will eventually fade to become more green again. So the variegation won't last forever, exactly like that. It will fade a little bit. Like you can see over here, this patch is more green than when it first came out. It looks more white. But I can see roots within the pot. I can see roots going into the moss pole. So I know that this plant was very happy with its transfer onto the moss pole. It started attaching and now it's going to start climbing. So it's going to get huge. So yeah, very, very excited about this addition. And I'm very glad I waited to get one of these until the prices were more reasonable again. Because a few years ago, this plant would have made me bankrupt, essentially. All right, next up, we've got my Oxalis triangularis. Now, this plant, I love this plant, and I've been loving this plant for a good year now. But before that, I actually had no desire to ever grow this plant. I was gifted this plant by a friend, or I was gifted one corm with one leaf on it. And I didn't really care about it for the first, I didn't really care for it properly the first maybe year and a half or so, and I definitely didn't give enough light. It was a game changer as soon as I started giving it a lot of bright indirect light. Hang on, let me sit back down again. Getting tight. So the game changer was really giving it a lot of bright indirect light, and as soon as I did that, it started multiplying by itself, heaps. I never propagated this plant. This plant has all just propagated from one corm. I have repotted it twice and it hates repotting. So be aware that after a repot, it might go through a little bit of shock. It can also go through dormancy if you live in a colder country. But over here, this plant doesn't go dormant for me because I keep it inside. Again, it's not an aeroid, so it's not in my aeroid mix. It's in a mix of just 50% cocoa peat and 50% perlite because it needs a lot of water or better water retention. It has really fine roots. And that's really all I do. I just water this plant every 2 to 3 days because it's very thirsty, and I like to shake it as well. It's just mimicking wind, and the plant actually really appreciates it. It really fluffs up the plant a little bit and gives it back a little bit of life. So yeah, to me, this is a no-brainer. This is probably always going to be on my list of favorites because it's just such a nice, colorful impact and so different to the rest of my collection. Also, let me put up a photo. That photo was from March 2022, so just over a year ago. And honestly, I already thought back then it was super lush, but only when I look back at those photos and see how small it actually looked and notice how much it has grown. Because obviously I see it every day, right? And there's maybe a leaf or two growing every day, but there's also a leaf or two dying every day. So I always just thought it kind of stayed the same, but looking back at the photo from last year, I actually just realized how much bigger it has gotten. So, happy days. Alright, next up we've got Philodendron plomanii. I believe this is the narrow form. Now, you guys know I love climbers. I'm not the biggest fan of crawlers. I'm having a bit of sometimes I'm struggling a little bit with crawlers as well. Not necessarily getting them to grow. They grow, but I struggle with crawlers and spider mites. I don't know what it is, but spider mites love my crawlers. Including this one, but this is so pretty, I'm more than happy to give it a fight. So this plant, I could not find a before photo of this plant, but I know that I've had this plant for maybe maximum a year and a half. And since I potted it up, it has only really climbed halfway up its pot, but it has increased in stem size quite decently. I don't know if you can see this. And it has certainly increased in leaf size very decently. I don't have the original leaf anymore, but this would have been one of the first leaves that has grown in my environment. And then the latest one looked like this. And now there's a brand new one coming here. But another reason why I love this plant is its backside. I just love these pink veining. Yes, Brad? And the cute little ruffled petioles. Let me see if you can put this close so you can see the ruffled petioles. Yeah. That is an absolute winner to me. I love this plant. I love the dark veining, the silver. There's just positives about this plant. Okay, let me sneak in over here so we can talk about the next plant. This is Epipremnum pinnatum, maybe Cebu blue. When I bought it, it was sold to me as a Cebu blue. It looked like a Cebu blue for the longest time as well. Let me put in a photo from last year. You can see that, you can see the smaller leaves at the bottom of the pole. That's what I started off with. So it started off with, honestly, maybe 2 leaves of this size. Not huge. And then it has taken so quickly to the pole. But as it has matured, it has also lost most of its silverish color. It's looking really green now. To be honest, I don't know if this is normal. I have definitely seen more silverish looking ones in mature form as well. Maybe there's something to do with light exposure. Maybe it's a different type, a different cultivar, I don't really know. You guys know by now, I don't really care about the name of plants, and I'm sure somebody in the comment section is gonna have their opinion on what this plant should be. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter what this plant is called. Even if I give you the name of this plant, there's still chances that if you go to a seller and you tell them I want this plant, that they're mislabeling their plant. So, I don't know. I don't know. Let's move on. The reason I love this plant is not because of its name. I love it because of its leaves. And I love it for how fast it was in actually maturing and giving me these beautiful leaves with so many splits. So yeah, this is an impactful little plant and super, super easy as well. It lives right here behind me on a forever basis. So this is actually its home. It's not just beautiful, it's also really, really easy to care for. Well, if you've watched my recent videos, you would know what this plant is. If you haven't, what are you doing? On that note, also make sure to subscribe, please. Thank you. This is my Monstera dubia, and I just recently gave it a chop, and then I converted it to a grow vertical moss pole. Grow vertical is the moss pole with the plastic backing. And after the chop, it reshot in 2 spots. So now I have 2 growth points on there. One on the right over here, and one on the left over here. And both are growing like there's no tomorrow. Look at these leaves. And this is still really soft and fresh, so it's going to unfurl a lot. Here, another one coming. So this is growing really fast now. Definitely having the 2 growth points just doubles the impact as well. So I'm obsessed with this. Perfect example how this plant, when, after the chop, this plant was looking a little bit empty, a little bit sad. These are quite old, these leaves over here, and you can see that they're starting to go a little bit brown around the edges as well. It also kind of took a step back for a few months as well, because I had other plants that wanted the prime spot closest to the window because I wanted to see them mature, like the Epipremnum, for example. So you know, it got a little bit less light, which meant the leaves were decreasing a little bit. It wasn't really looking the best. So, you know, that's what I mean with not all plants look great at all times. I mean, they look great at all times, but in my personal experience, they obviously have like a certain peak when they look their best. And then they go through a little bit of time to regrow or something like that. So anyway, they're living organisms. It's great. Also means that with 150 plants, there's always room for a plant to shine. It's not always just the same plants that take the spotlight. It's definitely a bit of a rotating thing, which keeps this hobby interesting, or at least keeps me interested in it. Means that whenever I rearrange, I have a different plant to deal with that looks very different to the way it looked maybe half a year ago, which to me personally keeps this fun. Alright, so let me put this back. Alrighty, I'll wrap it up over here. As I said, this was really just a quick show and tell video. It wasn't the most informative, but if you're after information, I have so many tutorials. I have a lot of Q&As where I answer a lot of your questions, so just check out all of the videos linked in the description if you want to learn more about my care approach. I hope you still enjoyed this video, and I hope that some of these plants might have made it onto your wish list. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and leave a nice comment, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!